Good afternoon or good morning to everybody. We'll give it just a moment as folks trickle in before we get going with the second candidate forum for the ABA YLD. And since today's program is recorded, what I would ask is that anyone who is not a candidate, if you could turn off your video. We will have a period in which there can be questions asked from the audience. So for that point, if you have a question from the audience, you can turn on your video. But hopefully that'll minimize distractions for those who might view this on the recording. Thanks all for being here. This is the second candidates forum that we're having this year. And as we're past the mid-year meeting, the slate of candidates is final, and we can't have any new additional candidates joining in on any of these three contests. As a reminder, these elections will be held at the 2021 annual meeting, which will be this August 2021. Stay tuned for some more updates over the coming weeks about how the YLD's annual meeting will be held, including information on how we'll carry out our elections process. This is not a candidates debate, it is a candidates forum. The candidates are reminded to emphasize their own qualifications rather than debating with the other candidates. We will proceed through each election in turn, starting with the HOD representative candidates, followed by the secretary candidates, followed by the clerk candidates. Today, we're going to try and give a little bit more time to the candidates to talk over last time, which was a little bit more rapid fire. We're going to allow each candidate to have up to 3 minutes to do an opening statement. Then we'll ask 3 questions of each candidate with up to 3 minutes response from each candidate. As time allows, we'll open the floor for additional questions, and then each candidate will be given an opportunity for a closing statement should they wish. With that, we're going to turn into the HOD representative candidates. The one House of Delegates representative elected at the annual meeting will serve as one of our 4 division delegates in the House for a period of 3 years. To start us off, I'm going to turn to Casey Payton of St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands to do up to a 3-minute introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Casey Payton. And in the first candidates forum, I talked about why I decided to join the Young Lawyers Division and how I see it as a volunteer opportunity that I really enjoy. Today, I'd like to share a little bit about some of the projects that I've led because of my involvement in the YLD. I believe that it is important for your next representative to the ABA House of Delegates to be able to share some of the magic that happens when YLDers get inspired and work together. I'm talking about collaboration, because that is where I believe the YLD really shines. When I became the district representative for the U.S. Virgin Islands and South Carolina, I knew that I wanted to bring elements of the YLD to the Virgin Islands. I started my brainstorming by brainstorming ways to put on a regional summit. I knew that there was funding available through the competitive application process for a YLD regional subgrant. I just had to come up with a topic. I walked into the 2018 YLD Fall Conference in Charleston, South Carolina, and in the front of my mind, I was adamant to use that time around my YLD colleagues to come up with a regional summit idea that everybody could get behind. I was very impressed by the new Men of Color project and by the No Limits initiative. I remember having some good conversations with Joe Bond and also with Rene Morency about how we could rally behind these initiatives in a way that could light a fire. And that's when the idea was born, a Young Lawyer Leadership Summit. Of course, there had been so many discussions that year about how we could show other young lawyers what made the YLD so valuable. I really wanted to bring that conversation to the Virgin Islands, and let me tell you, it doesn't take much to get people to travel down here for CLEs and a full day of boating on a catamaran in St. John. I really wanted to do something out of the box and just push the boundaries a bit, because that's what we learned how to do in the YLD. The programming ideas were developed by the Men of Color Project and the No Limits Initiative. All of the panelists were either a woman or a person of color. The panelists were a combination of Virgin Islands young lawyers and YLDers who flew down from across the country, from South Carolina, Michigan, Connecticut, Florida, and Washington, D.C. It was rich and powerful programming, but just as importantly, it was a way to bring fresh, spirited, and tenacious young lawyers together from across the country to network and inspire. The Young Lawyer Leadership Summit included a half day of CLE programming, a luncheon, a happy hour, and a full-day boat trip where connections were made that might last a lifetime. One pillar of my campaign is collaboration. It is imperative that your next representative to the House of Delegates can articulate that young lawyers in the Young Lawyers Division excel at this activity and that we have so much fun doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Payton. We will now turn to Rene Morency, the other candidate for HOD representative YLD representative to the House of Delegates, for up to a 3-minute introduction. Mr. Morency.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you all for joining us today. We certainly appreciate your time, and we appreciate the opportunity to share with you our excitement, our enthusiasm for the opportunity to serve you. My name is Rene. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I respectfully ask that in August you vote to offer me the opportunity to serve you and all the young lawyers in the ABA House. I will share with you an outline of my skills, credentials, and heart. That's what I have to offer you. I'll share with you my reasons, your choice, and our YLD. So my reasons. You might have heard some of this. I'm going to go in a little bit more detail today. I am deeply passionate about the betterment of our profession. I understand that young lawyers are the best and most diverse source of ideas. And because I'm confident that I'm the best suited to deliver what I've already delivered in the House: effective, persuasive professionalism. Now, as to your choice is someone who's already done well the job he's asking to do. I've already served in the House and have advocated forcefully, yet reasonably and respectfully, for issues of concern to young lawyers. I've testified in the well of the House multiple times, worked on resolutions, lobbied across the ABA to secure supportive resolutions. And I know the House, its rules, its traditions, its structures, and its leaders. Yet I fervently feel that the status quo is not good enough. Your choice includes a candidate who has attended 19 of the last 20 YLD Council meetings, who's meaningfully participated in YLD Assembly 6 times, who has successfully testified at assemblies in favor of resolutions, who was honored to introduce the chair of the House of Delegates at YLD Assembly, who serves on his local bar's YLD exec board and has done so since 2014 and now serves as its chair, and who has for 2 years been serving a term on the exec board of our local big bar, and who serves, of course, on the ABA YLD Council. So as to our YLD, I listen more than I talk. I've never disparaged anyone in the association, ever. And yes, civility is very important. And so it is something that I embrace, something that a number of us have in common. I know it's something that our chair, Chris Brown, has talked a lot about of late, and it's something that I'm passionate about as well. Our YLD is a community of communities nested within a greater community. And so I will pursue the priorities that you define. I'll amplify the voices of young lawyers in the House, as I have regularly done for years. And most importantly, I will show up every day with gratitude, because that is how I roll. Leaders and members of the organized bar have helped me in my development immeasurably, and I'm excited to continue to give back and to serve.
Thank you, Ms. Morency. We will now get into the questions that are pre-drafted. If anyone from the audience has a question that they would like to ask, you can go ahead and let me know via the chat function on this Zoom. Ms. Morency, we're going to start with you for the first question. What do you believe to be the #1 attribute required to be a successful House of Delegates representative on behalf of the YLD? And can you tell us how you embody that attribute?
Absolutely. I would say it's engagement. And there's a close second. You asked for one, so I'll mention the one, but this close second really is listening, which is related to engagement. And by engagement, I mean show up ready to do the work, ready to engage members of the House from all corners of the ABA. So for those of you who are not as well versed in how the ABA works, the House of Delegates includes delegates from individual states. It also includes delegates from sections and divisions. It also includes delegates who are of affiliate organizations. All of those have a role to play within the ABA, and I've engaged actively all of them. And so, for example, the reason why I am well suited for this particular attribute is because it's been well demonstrated in what I've done in past ABA annual meetings and mid-year meetings. So, for example, just so that we're a little bit more specific, at the most recent ABA mid-year meeting, we had a number of resolutions that were sponsored by the YLD, resolutions that were sponsored by the Law Student Division, and also some resolutions that were of interest to the young lawyers, which weren't necessarily sponsored by the young lawyers, but which were on our consent calendar. And what we mean by consent calendar, for those of you who are not familiar, is there's certain resolutions that we believe are so uncontroversial that they might not necessarily require a lot of debate. And so we vote for them as a whole, and then the assembly, the Young Lawyers Assembly, approves them. And so at the mid-year meeting this year, I worked very hard to help to pass a number of our resolutions, including working with my friends in the Women's Caucus, my friends in the LGBT Caucus, my friends in the Minority Caucus. I had prepared remarks if we needed any remarks to be made within the well of the House. And I did this in order to move forward the priorities that were defined by the Young Lawyers Division. And so what I mean to point out here is, by engagement, I mean I use relationships, I leverage relationships that I already have within the ABA and throughout the ABA, not just in the Young Lawyers Division. I have relationships that I've developed because I've been engaging in the House for so many years. I have a number of relationships that I can call on. In fact, and I do call on those relationships, and I did call on those relationships, for example, at mid-year meeting, at the annual meeting this past summer. And so that's it in a nutshell. It's engagement. It's what I do. It's who I am.
Thank you, Mr. Morency. Ms. Payton, same question. What do you believe to be the #1 attribute required to be a successful House of Delegates representative on behalf of the YLD? And can you tell us how you embody that attribute?
Thanks, Chris. So the #1 attribute that I think the next House of Delegates representative needs is to be able to understand camaraderie. And I think that the reason that I embody that attribute is because since I started getting involved in the YLD about 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, I've really I dove in, and I started off with a scholar. And so, I have my cohort mates, the folks that I started off with. I mean, they really are the people that I lean on whenever I have a question, I don't understand how to do something, or if I, need some feedback about how I'm doing. That's really where I start. But then after I was a scholar, every year I've tried to take on some kind of leadership position or something else that I can learn more by doing that. And so, I mentioned that I was a district representative. I was on the national conferences team, and then I started, leading as a vice chair or vice director, and then a director of the member resources team. And I'm currently a director of the professional development team. And, if I wasn't this involved, if I didn't have these roles, I think that, I might feel a little bit like, kind of like first timers feel when they go to conferences. I might feel a little bit lost and not really, know how to navigate things. But I feel like by getting involved so much, I now know, what to do when I go to conferences. I have all these different tasks and different people that I need to talk to, put events on together or to get our panels together. And one person that I really have relied on a lot is someone named Ashley Wilson. And so Ashley Wilson is so important to me and special to me because she was the district representative for the Virgin Islands in South Carolina before I became the district representative. And so because, the Virgin Islands and, South Carolina are so far apart, we really have to talk to each other to understand what's going on within the district as a whole. And so, you know, she's somebody that I always find at conferences to see how her district's doing, see what we can do together. When I had my Young Lawyer Leadership Summit, of course she came down, of course she spoke, she's fantastic. And then when I went to the conference in Charleston, I mean, we did a dine around at her boss's house. And then she invited me back to do a speaking engagement at, you know, a couple of her bar events. And so I just think that it's so important that when you make these connections, that you have fun doing it, you build this mutual trust. And so that's why camaraderie to me is the most important one.
Thank you, Ms. Payton. Ms. Payton, we're going to stick with you for the next question to start us off. A recent survey of House of Delegates members showed that 88% of delegates have been practicing for more than 10 years. In fact, 61% have been practicing for more than 30 years. Can you tell us about how you would approach being one of the youngest people in terms of practice experience in the body, and how you would seek to be an effective advocate despite being such a much young lawyer?
All right, thank you for that question. You know, age to me has never kept me from doing something that I, you know, am passionate about. I think that when you have that drive, that tenacity, that passion behind you, people can kind of see past just, you know, what you look like, your age, or how long you've been in the profession. You know, before I became a lawyer, I was the district scheduler for Congresswoman Barbara Lee in Oakland, California. And so that was a job where the person who had it before me was, I would say, almost like 50 years older than me. And that was what they were used to, you know, that was comfortable, that was normal. And I came in, and when the position was open, I just said, I want it, and this is why, and this is what I think I can do. And every day my boss took me very seriously. And I think it's because she just saw that I was working so hard and that I was so excited about being there, and that I just really, you know, I appreciated the mission that we had. And so I feel the same way in the YLD. Yeah, I mean, maybe we feel more comfortable around folks that are our same age or been practicing the same amount of time as us, but that's not going to stop us from going and sharing our passion and our positions with folks who are older. And, you know, a lot of times people who've been practicing longer, they want that fresh, young energy. They come to us and, you know, they've been doing these things for a long time, and they're like, you know, you're coming out here with all this new passion and energy. Like, they kind of want to drink some of that juice that we're serving them. So, you know, I have a lot of good friends within the ABA, especially, you know, coming from the Virgin Islands, coming from you know, the territory that I'm coming from. And I don't think that anyone really stops and thinks, like, how old is Casey? Like, how long has she been doing this? Because I just try to hold my head up and try to have as much confidence as possible in what I'm saying. And I think that they understand that I believe it. And I think that that's what really matters.
Thanks, Ms. Payton. Mr. Morency, same question. A recent survey of House of Delegates showed that 88% of delegates have been practicing for more than 10 years, and 61% have been practicing for more than 30 years. Can you tell us how you would approach being one of the youngest people in terms of practice in the body, and how you would seek to be an effective advocate despite being a much newer lawyer?
Yeah, I would happily tell you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the question. You know, the way that I would do it is the way that I have done it. And so, number one, I do have respect for our elders. While they might be in a different generation and they might have dealt with things and have sort of a different lived reality than we have, they've also lived some life and they have some wisdom to share. And so I'm never too quick to dispense or reject whatever wisdom our elders might have. At the same time, that said, our Young Lawyers Division, we're ready to evolve the profession. The profession is one of the legal profession is one of the professions that's the least resistant to change, that's the least innovative, that's the most anachronistic. most tied to its traditions of many professions out there. And we need to, in the Young Lawyers Division, we need to hold on to the things that work and to move on from the things that don't work. And so the good news is that because I show up with a spirit of respect and with a spirit of gratitude, and definitely with a spirit of service, I think I know that I have formed and continue to form very strong relationships with these elders within the association. So I'll give you an example. When I first became a representative, a delegate for the House of Delegates, one of the first events I attended was a section officers conference, which is a conference of section officers, as opposed to state and local delegates, which is another bucket of individuals, of attorneys that are represented in the House. So at this event, I made friends, and these friends that I made way back then, 5 years ago, continue to be people that I call on today. I use they're mentors to me, and just as importantly, I give them feedback and insights from the Young Lawyers perspective. And when the Young Lawyers Division has, for example, resolutions that are of very great concern to us and to those within our division and the lawyers whom we represent, I'm able to bring those to them formally and informally, and they turn a very interested and sympathetic ear to what we have to say, because of that bond that we've created, because of that trust that they've created, that I've developed with them, and it's really gratifying, and I look forward to being able to continue to build on that and to leverage that for the benefit of the young lawyers.
Thank you, Mr. Morency. As a reminder, if anyone in the audience has a question that they wish to ask, go ahead and let me know via the chat function so I can put you into the queue. We're going to stick with Mr. Morency for the third question that I have pre-drafted to start us off. Mr. Morency, membership is an association-wide concern. A large percentage of early career practitioners drop ABA membership. If elected as one of the 4 HOD representatives, what do you believe your role would be, if any, as it relates to membership retention or decline?
Yeah, thanks for that really important question, which is sort of a hot button issue for our association, isn't it? We have this expression that we use in the halls of the ABA. Membership is everybody's job, and tied in with that is the fact that diversity and inclusion and equity is everybody's job. Not only is it the 4th of the ABA's 4 goals, it also is an essential part of how we can drive membership, retain membership, grow our membership, and at least cease to lose members. Our profession, thankfully, slowly is becoming more inclusive over time, and so in that process, we'll be reaching out to members of our profession who haven't necessarily always felt listened to and haven't always felt respected, perhaps even. And so that is vital to how we will improve membership. In addition, just by pushing for issues of concern to young lawyers, that will help to for young lawyers to feel that membership in the ABA is relevant to them. So for example, some of our recent resolutions that I've very strongly advocated for among my friends and colleagues in the House of Delegates include, for example, issues of menstrual products within bar exam settings, for example, right? And prohibitions on those, and the fact that those are unreasonable. When young lawyers see us standing up for young lawyers, it becomes apparent to them that, oh, well, maybe what the ABA does is important. In addition to that, there's a lot of what we do that is substantive in terms of individual practice areas. Whatever practice area you're in, literally whatever practice area you're in, there is an entity or sub-entity within the ABA that focuses on that. And the more that we can sort of tell our story within the our members and outside of our membership, the more that young lawyers will feel that ABA membership is relevant. So also, for example, one of the things I like to do is, in terms of engagement, is I like to reach out sort of across the aisle, so to speak, and not just cabin myself within the YLD, but also reach across other sections and divisions that I'm actively involved with. For example, the business law section, real property trust and estates, tax section, etc. The commission on the commission on women, the women minority caucus, the women's caucus, all these entities, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. I'm out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Morency. Ms. Payton, same question. Membership is an association-wide concern. A large percentage of early career practitioners drop their ABA membership. If elected as one of 4 HOD representatives, what do you believe your role would be, if any, as relates to membership retention or decline?
All right, thank you for that question. And I couldn't, I couldn't agree with Rene more. I think that, membership is everybody's job. And I think that my role in the House of Delegates is to be kind of an ambassador for what value the YLD brings to young lawyers and what value the ABA brings to young lawyers. And, while I haven't been a part of, a membership team in the Young Lawyers Division, when I was in law school, I did get really involved in membership for the National LGBT Bar Association. In law school, I was elected for a two-year term as the student co-chair of the National LGBT Bar Association. In fact, I was the first law student at Howard to hold that role. And so I got really involved in membership. I was part of the membership committee, and we were calling people when their membership was lapsing. You got a personal phone call, you got calls before conferences. And I see the YLD doing similar things, especially with the first timers reception. Whenever I'm, in town for a conference, I really enjoy going to those first timer receptions, because people want to know, why are you here? I'm here this time, but this is a lot of work to come out here. Why should I come back? And I love sharing my story with people, because I feel like I have personally gotten so much value out of it. That's why I brought YLD, YLDers down to the Virgin Islands, so I could share with my friends and my colleagues what they could also get if they were involved in the YLD. And so that I think that's my role, just to show the value. And I think everybody here can see, that I definitely feel it myself. So I'm able to share that with others.
Thanks, Ms. Payton. We have gotten 2 questions from the audience, but I want to make sure we're keeping on a good schedule too. So let's, to both the candidates, I'm going to ask you to try and keep your answers brief to these. The first question, we're going to start with Ms. Payton again, is have you reached out to or engaged any of the current YLD HOD representatives to gain insight into the responsibilities and obligations of a YLD rep, and what did you learn?
All right, so I have reached out to a previous YLD HOD rep, and also an ABA, current ABA HOD rep. So I feel like, it's important. It is important to reach out to folks who are in that role or who have done it in the past, just so you understand what you're getting into. I know that we do have some rules about, things that we can or cannot do when it comes to reaching out. But for me, it was mostly before I said yes to declaring my candidacy. I wanted to know if this was really a role that I thought that I could do well at, and something that I had enough time and capacity for. And when I reached out, I found out that the answer to all those questions was yes. And so that's where I am so far. I know I will be reaching out again if you guys choose to, vote for me to be the next HOD representative.
Thank you, Ms. Payton. Mr. Morency, same question. Have you reached out to or engaged with any of the current YLD HOD representatives to gain insight into the responsibilities and obligations of a YLD rep, and what did you learn?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. I have. In fact, I've reached out to most of them. Not all, but I've reached out to most of them. And because I it should be evident that, when you're asking for a job, you should understand as well as you can, what that job entails. Now, mind you, of course, I've served in the House, and I've served quite actively in the House as I've described. Yet I haven't necessarily served in the House as an elected representative of the Young Lawyers Division. So it was incumbent upon me to educate myself about this position within that context. So I did do so. So one of the things I learned was something quite interesting, which is that the delegates work as a team, which is not surprising. Of course, it takes teamwork to make the dream work, as one of my favorite YLD individuals is fond of saying. But in particular, they strategize with regard to moving resolutions through the House, and so that was interesting to note. And so, as a result, actually, of what I learned, as I went into the mid-year meeting, I slightly adjusted and improved my approach to advocating for resolutions that are of great interest to the Young Lawyers Division. So I'll explain to you exactly what I mean. So, for example, there were a number of initiatives that were also very relevant to the law students, which of course are near and dear to my heart. Those included, as I mentioned, the one regarding menstrual products. There was also one regarding student loans to be discharged in bankruptcy, which was eventually withdrawn, but also one to implement programs to assist lawyers who were experiencing financial hardship due to their student loan obligations. Another one was in regard to well, actually, let's just talk about those in particular for now. And so what I did was, as I worked with and reached out to my contacts in other sections and divisions and forums, state representatives, et cetera, and asked them to think strongly and vote in favor of these resolutions and why they should and why it matters, I also went back and gave that feedback to, for example, our speaker, to the point people on individual resolutions, to make sure that they were informed about my activities in terms of how I was proceeding, the success I was having, to make sure that we were working in a collaborative way. And so that's how I use that information. That's how I intend to act in the future as well.
Thank you, Mr. Morency. We do have another question from the audience, but in the interest of time, we're going to move to the conclusions, should the candidates want them. I'll save this question and ask it as part of the next forum that we have closer to annual. So we're going to turn to the conclusions. Mr. Morency, you're up first. If you would like to give a conclusion, you may do so now.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So as for conclusions, I would reiterate to you a few things. Number one is that, my slogan, skills, credentials, and heart, of course, which is what you're going to get with me. It's what you always get with me. I would also direct you to our website, reneinthehouse.com. If you go to reneinthehouse.com, you will find a lot more information about why I believe I'm worthy of the investment of your trust for this position. A couple other things. The word friends and fun have been used this afternoon, and I think Casey Payton got it right when she mentioned those things. Part of people are human beings, right? And at the end of the day, we relationships matter, friendships matter, and there is no question that the ABA YLD and the ABA more broadly has represented that for me, and it served me well, and I want to share that with others as well. And so, a couple of ways in which I do that, just as a for example. So recently, I was at the annual meeting of the National Native American Bar Association, and there was a couple of students who were there. The outgoing and incoming president of the National Native American Law Students Association, and they were so they were so impressive, and they were so powerful, and they were so brilliant, just like so many young lawyers are, right? Well, or they're not young lawyers yet, but they will be. If all goes well, and I have no reason to believe that they won't. And I reached out to them, right? And I reached out to them to make sure that they knew, A, how proud we are of them, and B, how welcome they are within the ABA, right? And this is what it's all about. It's all about reaching out to individuals and making individual relationships, and letting people know that you care, and letting people know that they matter, and that their voices and their lived experiences matter, right? And so, yeah, and I offered myself as a resource to be a mentor, and more, and just as importantly, to educate them in terms of what the ABA does and how it works, and also to connect them with our law students division. So that's essentially how I roll. I'm a first gen, like many of you are first gen. I didn't grow up with lawyers in my family. I was the first person to, the first time I ever met a lawyer that I knew of, I think was, well, let me put it to you this way. I only knew two by the time I graduated from undergraduate school, if you can believe it. I grew up in a challenging neighborhood, and I want to make this profession as welcoming as possible to everyone, regardless of their background, regardless of whatever advantages or privileges they might have or lack. And so I ask for your trust and your opportunity to serve you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morency. Ms. Payton, same opportunity. You may speak for up to 3 minutes for conclusion.
I want to thank everyone who helped put on this candidates forum, and for all of you for taking the time to find out who's running and to learn a little bit more about each of the candidates. My name is Casey Payton. I'm running for YLD representative to the ABA House of Delegates because I believe that I have the experience and the energy required to dive into this role. I hope that each of you take a minute to read through my candidate statement, because I've served in a lot of leadership roles in the YLD over the past 5 years. And in those leadership roles, I've demonstrated my commitment to advocacy, civility, and collaboration. Today, in my opening statement, I gave you one example of my ability to collaborate through securing a YLD Regional Summit subgrant to put on the Young Lawyer Leadership Summit in the Virgin Islands. While I have this time to speak with you today, I also want you to know that as a YLD district representative, I was charged with the task of implementing disaster legal services in the Virgin Islands after we were hit with 2 Category 5 hurricanes within the span of 2 weeks. Hurricanes Irma and Maria devastated the Virgin Islands, destroyed the power grid, shut down the airport for a month, and closed the schools and courts for a very long time. I didn't regain power at my home for nearly 5 months. But despite this devastation, I was charged with implementing disaster legal services because it is one of the responsibilities of every district representative if their district is affected by a disaster. Through the Disaster Legal Services Program, the Young Lawyers Division and FEMA provide immediate temporary legal assistance to disaster survivors pro bono. According to the Disaster Legal Services website, since September 2007, the YLD has responded to 222 declared disasters in 45 states and 5 US territories. With the help of the Disaster Legal Services team, it was my duty to respond to and to recruit Virgin Islands attorneys to help disaster survivors with their landlord-tenant issues, child guardianship issues, and more. A lot of strong feelings come over me when I think about that time because the conditions we were living in the Virgin Islands were deplorable. And yet I didn't have any trouble gathering enough eager, energized, and tough young lawyers to volunteer their time to help disaster survivors with their legal problems. I won several awards for my efforts. I won the ABA Government and Public Sector Lawyers Division Dorsey Award, which honors an outstanding public defender or legal aid lawyer. I also received a YLD Star of the Quarter and the Virgin Islands Bar Association President's Award. When I think about whether I have what it takes to represent the YLD in the House of Delegates, I think back to the projects that I worked on and the programs that I put on in my first 5 years of being a young lawyer, and I believe that my record has shown that I do have what it takes. I respectfully ask for your vote for YLD representative to the ABA House of Delegates. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Payton, and thank you again to both Ms. Payton and Mr. Morency for stepping up to the plate and putting their name in for candidacy as one of our 4 delegates to the House of Delegates.